So it was a warm Thanksgiving evening. Now, just by that description, you probably have already figured out that this probably does not happen in Pennsylvania. As a matter of fact, I was still living in Texas, and the next day, my wife and I were heading to Pennsylvania to visit with the TCC staff to see if it would be a good fit for me to come and be the Grampian campus pastor. So we're excited about that, but because of the hustle and bustle of the weekend, we knew we had some traveling to do, and we didn't take the 3-hour drive to see our family for Thanksgiving. So we just stayed home and prepared a nice little lunch for ourselves and just kind of hung out at the house for the afternoon. And later that evening, I told my wife, hey, I need to head up to the church where I was working as a youth pastor, and said I have to get some stuff ready for my leaders who are covering for me while we're gone this weekend. So I head up to the church, and again, it's beautiful outside. You know, the sun is shining. I think I was wearing a short-sleeved shirt. It was wonderful. And as I start working in my office, of course, it's about 6:30, 7 o'clock or so, and the light is slowly dimming. And as the night gets darker, well, everything around me gets darker. Of course, I don't go and turn all the lights on. I'm just sitting in my office. There's no need to do that. And as I'm sitting in my office, I don't know if you've ever sat in a large building or even in a church building at night with all the lights off except for one small light. But it's probably one of the most terrifying, creepiest things that you could ever experience. I mean, there's just weird creaks and weird pops that you just don't hear during the day. So every single noise kind of sets your hair on end. And you have to continually convince yourself, oh, it was nothing. It was just the wind. It's just the building cracking. There's nothing around me. I'm the only one here. And so as I'm working a little more, it's getting a little bit later. And then as I'm working, I just hear this loud pop from the gym behind me. And I think, well, that's odd. I'm sure someone just set a chair up weird, or they set a table up weird, and it kind of just fell over and slammed against the floor. And so I said, well, I better go check it out just in case. And so I get up, I walk out of my office, I turn the corner and start walking down the hallway to go look into the gym. I turn the hallway light on to give me a little bit more light. And as I peer into the gym, just illuminated by the hallway light, I don't see anything out of place. I don't see anything that looks abnormal. And so I thought, it must have just been the wind. Maybe somebody just hit something outside and it just reverberated through the building. I don't know. But I could convince myself that I was still the only one in the room. So I start walking back to my office, and as I'm walking back to my office, I hear footsteps behind me. I thought, that's weird. I must be just walking a little rougher or a little louder than I usually do. No big deal. It's just the echo of the gym. And so I walk a little more, and I continue to hear footsteps as I walk along. And then as I stop in front of my office door to head back in there, I hear more footsteps. I'm like, well, that's not me because I'm not moving. And then I hear whispers and voices coming from upstairs. And as I look upstairs, the staircase that is right outside of my office door, I just look up and think, this is really odd, right? There's no one here. There can be no one here at all. I'm the only one here. So thinking that maybe someone came through a back door or someone came in from upstairs or something, I just yell out a simple, hello? And immediately I hear footsteps just taking off, running down the hallway, trying to get away from my voice. And so I muster all the courage that I have, and I run inside my office, lock the door, get under my desk, and call the police. Because I am not dealing with any break-ins. I'm not about to lose my life or something horrible happen to me with me just doing work in my office. That just seems silly. So I call the police. They come. I let them in. They look around. No one's there. Come to find out, they tracked down a truck that was leaving pretty fast, and it was just a couple of teenage boys. They were outside at a park down the street playing some basketball, and it just got too dark for them to see. And so they said, let's just go break into the church, and we'll turn the lights on, and we can continue to play basketball tonight. Something simple, right? Something easy, something that didn't cause anyone any harm. They could have knocked on the door, and I would have let them in. It wouldn't have been a big deal. But here's the thing about courage, right? When we try to muster courage, there's an otherness to courage. Like if it's just me and myself, I'm gonna protect myself. I'm gonna hide under my desk, and I don't care what you think of me. I was terrified. But then there's been other times in my life where I've had to stand up for maybe the people in my care. There's been people that have approached my youth group that I've had to stand up to, or approach the people that I'm leading that I've had to stand up to and say, hey, look, we're not going to tolerate this, or you need to back down. And in those times when I'm having to fight for the people in my life, like, well, it's easy for me to go up and have the courage to face that fear. So we're looking at courage in this new series. We're starting to this new series called Unhindered, Nothing Holding You Back. And here's the thing about courage, right? We praise courage in our culture, and rightly so, right? We see courage exhibited in extreme situations, right? We see courage when it's in the face of war. Right, if you've been watching the news, right, you've obviously heard about Russia invading Ukraine, and we can see, like, even from the Ukrainian soldiers that they have courage. We could even say that, the Ukrainian president, he's in the streets rallying his people, the courage that he has. So we see it in current situations. We see it in people that have come before us, people like Martin Luther King Jr. as he stands up for the people and for his rights and for the people of his people's rights. Right, we see it in people like Abraham Lincoln, or huge historical characters that have had to face the odds and face adversity and had the courage to stand up. But we don't see courage just in the extreme situations. Courage is seen in our daily lives. Right? It takes courage to raise a child. It takes courage to work ethically at your job, or to be a good employee, or to fight for what's right for the people under your care. It takes courage to have a difficult conversation with your spouse. Courage isn't just limited to extreme situations. Courage is in the everyday happenings of life. And so when we look at this idea of courage, and I think we could define courage a million different ways. We could apply it to a million different situations, but I really want to get this idea. What is courage? So, of course, like any good researcher would do, I just get on Google and find the first definition that pops up, and this is the definition it gives me. It says that courage is the ability to do something that frightens us. Courage is the ability to do something that frightens us. Well, some of you, I'm sure, could probably resonate with that definition. You've had times in your lives where you've had to do something that frightens you, or you've had to face your fears and say, yeah, I got to step up and take care of this, and I'm going to have the courage to do so. You get the second part to this definition. It says that courage is the strength in the face of pain or grief. Now, maybe some of you can resonate with that, right? That idea of, yeah, there's been pain and grief in my life, and I had to face it. I had to approach it. I had to take it head on. So if I were to condense these two definitions, this is what I would say courage is. I would say that courage is the strength to move forward in the face of fear. It's the strength to move forward in the face of fear. But in all honesty, it's still a pretty simple definition. When we could apply that definition to just about anything or any situation. For instance, would we say that the school bully has courage? I mean, he stands up in the face of his fears, whether they're fears of inadequacy, or whether they're fears of hurt and pain that he has had in life. And so he faces the people in his school, and he exerts his power through his strength. I mean, we could say that's courage based upon the definition that I have given. But now I've been on the taking side of a bully, where a bully bullies me, and I wouldn't say a bully has courage. I mean, even with that simple definition, we could say, would the unethical boss have courage? You might have worked for a boss who has done some unethical things, or you might have heard stories of a boss that has done unethical things, and we could say, well, yeah, he has courage, right? He's having to fight for his company to make sure that things are successful and that he is successful, and so maybe he's going to do some unethical things, and facing his fear of the possibility of getting caught in order so that he can move forward in life. But we wouldn't say that's courage. Or maybe even on a bigger scale, would we say a terrorist has courage? This terrorist fights for what they believe in. They fight for what they think is right. And so they, at the risk of their own life, they take life. Or they cause destruction. We could say, well, yeah, a terrorist has courage, but we wouldn't really say that a terrorist has courage. You see, there's a morality concept to courage. We never attribute courage to those that are perpetrating evil. We say that courage is always on the side of good. And so when we see people stand up for what is right, for what is good, for what is beneficial, then we would say that courage is doing what is good. So if we want to even expand our definition a little more, we say that the courage is the strength to move forward in the face of fear to benefit the good. Now, again, that's still pretty simplistic. Because what if a person does something, right, to benefit them, but only them? What if the good that they're fighting for is only in their own self-interest? Would we say they have courage, or do we say they're just looking for self-glorification? Would we say they're fighting for to stand up to their fears so that other people can benefit? If it's only benefiting them, then we'd say, no, that's not courage. That's pride. That's self-glory. That's just looking after their own skin. That's not courageous. So here's, I think, the best definition that I've come up with so far that we can really land on. I really say that courage is the strength to move forward in the face of fear to benefit the good of others. That courage is the strength to move forward in the face of fear to benefit the good of others. Now, I think it's a pretty good definition. Now, again, you could come up with problems. I still see problems with this definition. I could say, well, who determines what's good, or who determines what's good for others, or how do we determine what strength is? Right? We could poke holes in it all day, but really, if we want to get to the heart of this matter, man, this is when we turn to Scripture. We turn to God's Word as He's revealed Himself, and as we see examples of courage throughout Scripture and how God has revealed Himself with people. We see time and time again as God raises people up to lead people or to lead events, that the courage that has taken place in them. And so all throughout this series of Unhindered, we're going to look at a guy named Joshua. Now, a little backstory, Joshua. Joshua was the mentee of Moses. And so Moses mentored him and trained him up and taught him all that he needed to know so that when Moses died, that Joshua could take his place and continue to lead Israel. And up to this point, Israel has been a fairly young nation. Right? I mean, we can look back into Genesis and we can see kind of their beginnings, and we see this point in time where they become slaves in Egypt. And God hears their cries, and He delivers them from slavery by using Moses to lead them out of slavery. And as they're kind of learning to rely upon God and to rely upon one another, God sends them wandering through the desert for 40 years under the leadership of Moses. And as they draw towards this promised land that God has promised to give them, to inherit, to live and rest in, to grow as a nation in, well, it comes time for Moses' life to end. And so he passes the reins off to Joshua. And so you have to understand, here we have Joshua, this leader of this nation, thousands of people that are hanging out in the desert, standing on the edge of entering the promised land. And God is going to use Joshua to lead His people into this land, to conquest this land, to take this land back that they once lived in before they were slaves. And so we get this awesome dialogue that God has with Joshua at the very beginning of Joshua 1. We find it in Joshua, which is fitting because it's about Joshua, so it's found in the book of Joshua. But in Joshua 1, verse 6, this is what God says to Joshua. He says, hey, Joshua, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. And so we have God saying, Joshua, be strong and courageous. You see, behind this word courageous is this idea of a strengthening of heart. You see, the ancient Hebrew, they don't really have a word for courage. And so it was always this idea of like, hey, you need to strengthen what is it within you, to strengthen your heart, to strengthen your innards, and do what's right. Muster up the strength that you can to lead these people. You see that we see that courage is not comprised of brave actions, although brave actions are a product of courage. But it starts within our hearts. It starts with deep within us as we approach our fears or approach what we need to do to benefit the good of others, and we muster up that courage, that strength to move forward. And then God goes on to tell Joshua another strong and courageous. In verse 7, he says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. So be strong in keeping this law. The Israelites haven't had God's law for a long time. They got it while they were in the desert, as Moses had a conversation with God, and God said, hey, this is how I want you to follow me. This is how I want you to be my people. And this law was set in place so that they could be in relationship with God. It would set them apart from the other nations as they walked into this new unknown land. And then God continues to give Joshua a little bit more instructions on this. He says, hey, keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything in it. And then you will be prosperous and successful. In other words, God's saying, look, Joshua, as you lead these people in, be strong and courageous, keep the law, meditate on it, make it a part of your mind, make it a part of the rhythm of your life. Continue to think about it and etch it into your brain. Because as you do that, you'll be successful. And then God ends his conversation with Joshua by saying this in verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So Joshua is getting this challenge from God saying, look, this is going to be tough. This is going to be hard. You're going to have to do some difficult things, but be strong and courageous in all these different things. Now, when we look at this, and we can kind of look through these verses and say, man, that's some great encouragement that God gives Joshua, but how does it really apply to me today? I mean, this is being said to a specific person at a specific time in a given specific situation. I mean, Joshua is about to lead these people into a land, to conquest this land, to take it back to be God's people. Now, I'm not Joshua. You're not Joshua. As far as I know, none of us are leading thousands of people into a new land. But as we look at these verses, we're going to break them down a little bit more because I think there's some application to this that we can take into our own lives. And we'll start with that first, strong and courageous. When God tells Joshua, be strong and courageous because you will lead these people. Right? We could say that we need to have the courage to lead. If you've ever led anything, you know that it takes courage. Right? There's times when we have to face different fears or we have to face different obstacles. We have to face, we have to make sure that we have the right strategy, or we can be worried about even giving the wrong advice to people as we lead them. Maybe there's even people that come and challenge our leadership, and so we have to approach that in a way that takes courage and a heart that is careful. And so we have to be strong to lead. We have to, as we lead our people, as we lead our businesses, as we lead the people in our life, and you don't have to own anything. Maybe it's just even as you lead your family. As you find situations where you have to say, I need to have courage to lead my family in this direction, or maybe it's just even leading yourself. For all of us, there are things in our life that, man, we don't always want to face. Because we know as soon as we face it, there's going to be pain, there's going to be grief that is attached to that. But as I have courage to lead even myself, right, I can know that this courage that God calls me to have, right, can lead me to something better on the other side. I think of it as, when my wife and I, we've lived in several different places, and with every move, right, we were moving into the unknown. We were moving, we had to make new friends, we had to find new jobs, we had to figure out what God was wanting us to do, where he wanted us to be. And that takes courage, right? There's unknowns in that. So sometimes leading our family, sometimes just leading ourselves. Now, the second challenge that God gives to Joshua, he says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. As I mentioned, right, the law was fairly new to the Israelites. It was meant for them to follow so they could be set apart from the other nations. There were things in the law about, what they could wear, what they could eat, how they should conduct business, how they should interact with one another. But most importantly, it was, how do I keep this law so that I can be in relationship with God? And this law, it consisted of 600 plus different commandments, and you can imagine it'd be hard to kind of figure out and to keep track of and to keep that law. And there would be times where you'd be faced with temptations that you'd have to kind of veer off from what God was saying. But God's like, no, have courage and keep that law. Now, we know a little bit more of the story than Joshua did. Right, that a lot of time has passed since Joshua's time. And what we see now is that when Jesus came to this earth, when he came and took on flesh and then he died and rose again, he actually fulfilled this law. He actually tells us in Matthew 5 that, hey, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So Jesus says, look, I didn't come to abolish it so you don't have to follow it anymore. I've come to fulfill it so that when you live your life in me, when you make me the subject of your life, and I have fulfilled that law for you. That doesn't mean we can just ignore it and ignore God's commands, but the idea is that we're going to continue to still pursue God. We're still going to lean into who Jesus has made us so that we can continue to follow God's command, continue to be in relationship with him, and continue to just lean into the promises that he gives us. A few years after Jesus' death and resurrection, actually the Apostle Paul, he tells us this. He says that in Galatians, that the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. If we love our neighbor as ourselves, man, we will keep the law. So we can say, man, we need to have the courage to love. Right? As I open myself up and really love people, right? We understand that in order to love people, it takes some vulnerability. It takes some effort. It takes some action. It just takes some risk, right? The theologian and philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, he calls it humble courage, right? The humble courage is the courage that we open our heart to love and suffering, right? So we know when we love people or when we put our necks out for people, right? There's going to be times where we're taken advantage of. There's going to be times when we love people that, man, there's going to be some suffering involved in that. People are going to let us down, or people are going to do us wrong, or they're going to disappoint us. But see, the whole idea of loving others, right? These aren't reasons that we don't love others. They're only reasons to know that we have to have the courage to continue to love others. You see, the idea of not loving, I would say, is rooted in fear, right? If I choose not to love people, I'm fearing for how my feelings might get hurt, or how I might be taken advantage of, or maybe it's even a fear of not being loved back. But if courage is standing up to our fears, and right, then this humble courage, this idea of loving others and having the courage to love, is knowing that I'm not going to allow fear to harden my heart, but I'm going to have courage so that my heart can be open to those in need. And so we have to have the courage to love. And then that third challenge of courage that God gives to Joshua, he says, be strong and courageous, for the Lord God will be with you wherever you go. Now, this is the challenge that keeps it all together, that binds all courage together. We could say, for us, it's the courage to endure, knowing that God is with us wherever we go. He's not just with us in the hard times. He's not just with us in the good times. He's not just in the places that we want to go or don't want to go. He's with us wherever we go, wherever. As we lean into this promise that God is with us wherever we go, well, it means he's with us whenever we go into the unknown. Now, I don't know about you, but I hate the unknown, right? Unknown breeds anxiety. It brings stress in my life when I don't know what's going to happen. But here's the thing. When we have this promise that God is with us when we go, it just means we have the courage to face the unknown. And whatever that unknown is in your life, maybe it's just the unknown of parenthood, or the unknown of your career choice, or the unknown of financial security, or just the unknown of future events, right? The unknown is so often found in the future. And so when we face that unknown, whatever that unknown is in your life, we can have the courage to continue to endure through that, knowing that God is with us. You see, courage isn't trying to figure out the unknown. Courage is just continuing to move forward as we face the unknown with God by our side. And so it really hits home even nowadays, right? Because even when we look at what Jesus says a few hundred years after Joshua, right? As a people that are following God, that are putting our trust in who God is, well, Jesus comes after his resurrection, and he gives a promise to his disciples. He gives a mission to his disciples, and it's very similar to the one that Joshua got from God. As a matter of fact, it has the same kind of flow. It even has the exact same promise that God gives to Joshua at the very end. If you've been around church a long time, you might have heard it being called the Great Commission. And this is what Jesus says to his disciples. He says, look, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So everything that is now under my control, it's all been given to me. I have the authority to do with it as I will. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. So even this idea that God's saying, look, now go and tell people what I have done. Have the courage to go and share your story with those around you. Bringing them into the family and drawing them and pointing them towards me. He goes on to say, teaching all that I commanded. Remember, Joshua said, hey, be strong and courageous in keeping the law, to love one another, teaching them all that I commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So just as God is with Joshua, God tells his disciples, and it's a promise to you and to me as well. He'll go. Have the courage to talk with people. Have the courage to love people. Have the courage to endure suffering and pain with people. Have the courage to lead people and point them to me. And as you do that, you can be confident that I will be with you always. And so we have this awesome opportunity, right, to go and share the hope and love of God to all those that we encounter. We have the promise of courage to strengthen us to go and be what God has called us to be. So what is courage? Courage is the strength to face our fear for the benefit of the good of others. So let's be courageous. Let's be a church that says, yes, God, you are with me, and we will have courage, knowing that he provides it for us. Let's pray. God, we just thank you for who you are and just the promises that you give your people, that you give to us. Just God, even as Joshua is leading his people into this promised land, God, that you've challenged him to be courageous. God, and you also challenge us to be courageous, to live up to who you have called us to be. So as we pursue you, as we love people, God, just help us to be courageous in our leadership. Help us to be courageous in our love and courageous and have the courage to endure as you continue to guide us, as you continue to just work through us, to share your hope to the ends of the earth. God, thank you for being with us. Thank you for walking with us. We do all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.